Hello, I'm John and this is Must Read More. Today, I want to talk about the books I've been reading over the past 2 weeks, somewhere in there, 2 weeks. And I read 6 books. The first book I read was A Demon Haunted Land by Monica Black. It's about faith healers in post-war Germany and some of the people that they took advantage of, and sort of these apocalyptic beliefs that sprung up in the wake of the war, and this drive that the German people had for kind of latching on to a figure and pushing them into almost a divine status. And it's about the people who are taken advantage of and who suffered because they believed in these faith healers and they thought that they could heal them of cancer and TB and things like that, and of course they couldn't. What's kind of interesting is that faith healing does actually work in a kind of a placebo way, and it can work if a person's problems are mental rather than physical. The German people had some pretty complex issues going on in the wake of the war for obvious reasons, and a lot of them had this desire and drive for salvation, and they thought that these faith healers could give it to them. And it's kind of interesting because the main healer she talks about in this, nobody's really sure if he was an outright fraud or if he was mentally unstable and thought that he really did have powers. And it's really just kind of a wild story. It was pretty good. So it's A Demon Haunted Land by Monica Black. The next one I read was Icefire by Robert C. Wilson, which I picked up thinking it was a horror novel, but it's really not. It's actually a thriller. It's set on an island in Lake Superior near the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and there's a prison for the violently insane, the criminally insane. And of course, it's this modern facility, and there can't be any riots and there can't be any breakdowns because it's all run by computers, and there's just no way these inmates could escape and cause any problems ever, right? Only of course they escape, and then it's about a family's escape from these violent, insane guys with guns in the middle of a Michigan winter, and a couple of doctors also, and some people they know, and it turns into this chase across this island and eventually onto the frozen Lake Superior. And I read some reviews of this that said that it was probably too long. I would probably agree with that. It's quite a bit longer than most thrillers tend to be. And I felt there were some things that Robert Wilson kind of left out. Like, once the inmates escape from the prison, we don't really hear about what happens to the other prison guards or the other nursing staff or anything like that. It's kind of like they just stop existing. And I also felt like he builds up tension throughout this whole book, and then he made some choices, and Wilson made some choices in writing this that sort of deflated that tension when I felt like he should have, if anything, amped it up. I felt like he had a lot of opportunities to really amp up the tension in this book, and he just consistently fell flat on that. But I did enjoy it. It was a good read. It's probably the longest novel I've read this year. I think it's 550 some odd pages. And um, it was okay. I don't know if I'd read it again, but I enjoyed reading it this time. After that, I read uh, Lawrence Block's The Burglar in the Library, which is just a fun mystery about this guy named Bernie Rodenbar, and he steals art. He steals paintings and books and stamp collections and things like that. In the beginning, he's trying to get his girlfriend to go with him to this. It's an English style inn in Upper New York. It's a big mansion that somebody built about 100 years ago, and there's no TVs or anything like that. But she tells him that she can't go because she's getting married on Thursday, and dumps him. And so he takes his friend Carolyn to this English style inn, but he has an ulterior motive, which is that there is a book in the library, or he thinks there's a book in the library. Well, it's The Big Sleep. The Big Sleep was by Raymond Chandler, right? I haven't read The Big Sleep, and it was signed to Dashiell Hammett, and he thinks that if he can steal it, if it's still there, he can make a lot of money off of it. They get there in the middle of a snowstorm, and they're pretty well snowed in, and of course the woman who dumped him shows up with her new husband, and then a guy winds up dead, and somebody cuts the phone line, and they can't get out because there's a rope bridge that they have to cross to get to this place, and it falls into this creek, so they can't leave. And it was really good. It reminds me of that movie Clue with Tim Curry and Madeline Kahn. It's a different plot and everything, but it had that same kind of energy, and it was a lot of fun. And I'd like to read more of these some point in the future. And after that, I read The Tardus Incident by William Greenleaf, and the whole time I was reading this, I kept wondering if maybe the people who wrote the movie Pitch Black read this, because it has a very similar plot. It's not the same by any means. It's quite different, but it has similar elements. It's in the future at some point, and there is a space station, and all it does all day long is sends these pods. They're kind of like train cars or something, but they've found in the future this way to move these pods through something called the slipstream, which is where in an instant it goes from being in one place to somewhere else very, very far away by some means that's not really explained in the book. And they wind up sending a pod full of these 5 people to the wrong planet, to a planet called Tartarus, which hasn't been it hasn't been explored at all, so they don't know it's there. And of course, the people who sent them there don't know they sent them to the wrong planet, and they don't know how to find them, and the people who are there don't know how to get back. And there's something else that's wrong with this pod. It's kind of broken. So they're kind of like auditors. They go to these planets and audit these colonies for, the money they spend and the resources they're using and that kind of thing. So they're not like adventurers or anything like that. And there's one of them who takes a walk on this planet, and he finds an ancient city and a tomb. And he kind of has a mental breakdown, and he steals this component of the pod that will let them leave eventually, and he runs off into this tomb. And if they can't get him back and get back this component, then they'll never be able to leave. And on top of that, if they don't replace the component, the ship will explode and blow up a big chunk of this place and them with it. So they go down into this tomb and they find creatures, and that's really all I'm going to say, because I think you can probably imagine where it goes from there. But it was just a lot of fun. Just a short little read. I think I read it last Saturday or last Sunday, something like that. It was pretty good. After that, I read Douglas Reeman's Dive in the Sun with this old school 60s cover, and it was all right. It wasn't my favorite Douglas Reeman book. I think my favorite Douglas Reeman book is called, I think it's called The Pride and the Anguish. It's about a river or a gunboat in Singapore right around the time that the Japanese took over Singapore. So, what was that, 1941, somewhere in there? But anyway, this one is about the crew of a mini-sub who are tasked with blowing up a huge floating dock in an Italian harbor. And they manage to do that, and they get away, but their mini-sub has been damaged, so they have to ditch it. And now they find themselves in enemy territory, and they have to find a way to escape. And, of course, there's a romance that develops. In these books, there always seems to be a romance, no matter how improbable it may be. And it wasn't bad. It was okay for an action book. I mean, I've read quite a bit better books by Reeman, and just better books in this sort of style in general. I think the book kind of suffered because it seems to me like the book should have been about them trying to blow up this floating harbor instead of them trying to escape afterwards. I mean, that could be part of it, but it just seems to me like the biggest part of the book is kind of over and done with in the first 20 pages. It had its moments, but I probably wouldn't read it again. It was pretty standard for this kind of book. So, let's dive in the sun, which I keep trying to call Dive into the Sun, which would be a whole different thing, I think. But after that, I read Day One, Before Hiroshima and After by Peter Wyden. And this was okay. I kind of feel like I'd have liked this book better if I didn't already have a background in this kind of thing. For instance, I've read John Hersey's Hiroshima, and I've read The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, among others. And this is just pretty, this explains kind of how the scientists came up with their ideas, how they got funding, how it became a government program, how they managed to build the bomb, and then how they managed to use the bomb, and what the bomb did to Hiroshima. And Wyden seemed to have quite a bit of contempt for Robert Oppenheimer, and he seemed to have nothing but contempt for Harry Truman. I kind of, there's this drive now to kind of make Robert Oppenheimer into this sympathetic character, but everything I've ever read about Oppenheimer suggests that he was not a sympathetic character at all, that he was a cold, kind of cruel, self-important kind of man. that he would use people, that he would, he wanted to drop the bomb, for instance. He's kind of been portrayed as somebody who didn't want to drop the bomb when that's not true. And I kind of feel like he's cast as this sympathetic figure because he, wore that old hat, and he had a love of poetry. He could recite it at will, just about. And he had a face that allowed him to look sad. But Oppenheimer knew what he was doing. And I just don't find him a sympathetic character the way that some people want to make him out to be now. This would be an okay book to read if you're new to the subject entirely. But I think that if you want a better view of the subject, really, I would suggest that you read John Hersey's Hiroshima, The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, and Command and Control by Eric Schlosser. I think if you read those 3 books, you'll get a pretty good idea of the lead up to the creation of the bomb, the effects of the bomb, and then some problems with the bomb that have gone on after Hiroshima, and which remain an ever-present problem. So, but this really wasn't bad. Like I said, he was definitely biased against Oppenheimer and Truman, and he may be justified in that. I don't know, but it just came through very clearly. But he did seem to have this thought that if they had just stopped working on the bomb right then and there, it never would have come about. And I think that's pretty absurd. It seems to me that physics had reached a point where the next step was nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And I don't think that just stopping the Manhattan Project would have stopped that. It would have maybe taken another decade or 2 decades, but I think that it still would have come about. So I'm not going to talk about any of the moral issues about it. It would be better just to read the book, or to read any book about this subject. Yeah, so that's what I've been reading, and I haven't been posting very much lately, I know, but I have been making videos. I made, I think, 2 or 3 videos about Icefire that I never posted, and a couple of times, for whatever reason, I just couldn't find the right words. And I really don't know if anybody would want to hear me talk for 25 or 30 minutes about, an 80s thriller about, a prison escape. And so I am still making videos, but I'm just kind of doing it, or I'm trying to, the ones that I don't post, I just kind of look at them as practice. I'm trying to get better at this. And yeah, so if you've read any of these, I'd love to hear about what you thought, or if you'd like to read some of these, or just let me know your thoughts in general. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.